The year 1993 was pretty interesting for video games and Sonic in particular. Top of having two cartoons out of very different style, hell, and as they also had a couple of video game spin-offs, the puzzle-based Puyo Puyo infused Dr. Robotics Mean Machine and the pinball-focused Sonic Spinball. However, the best installment that came out that year, I would argue, was also my personal favorite of a very peculiar add-on, the Sega CD, an early foray into optical disc-based consoles would soon become the standard later on in the decade, and interestingly became probably what I consider to be the best experience on the system. Here is why, as this week marks the 30th anniversary, why I consider Sonic CD my favorite Sega CD game. Let's get started. While a lot of early titles on the system are definitely of the FMV variety, some of which came from like glorified video editing programs more than games, like the infamous Make My Video series. This one, however, ever looked at other features that the Sega CD enabled me in terms of rotation and scaling, and also other factors we'll get into, but also the simple fact that discs could actually hold more data than the cartridges could at the time. I'm allowing for stages to would be physically larger than they were on the Genesis, as well as take place multiple time frames, which we'll get into more in a bit. And also special stages being these UFO catchers in order to get the time stones, which is what having this game set of the Chaos Emeralds mean. Even though they functionally fill a similar purpose, don't get true in the game, once you beat it. They one key trick I'd like to point out is to, instead of jumping where the UFOs are, you jump where they will be. Just the shadows definitely got to make a big help for that. In addition to the animated intro and outro of the game, which have been present in every single version released to date, it's very interesting how both the Japanese and US version of the game had their own distinctive soundtracks, but the one constant between them is how there much more sounds could be he he used than the typical Genesis cartridge. Is that even very subtle voice clips as well. With depending on which version you're playing, an ominous live from Eggman during the boss fights, as well as Sonic going yeah whenever he gets next to life, and this also kind of continues into what I'll be addressing in the next point as well. I've talked about a few amount of times about how the best additions to the franchise are ones that complement the existing in formula rather than trying to clash with it. And on top of the other features mentioned, it actually added moves like the ability to run in place to build up speed. It was useful for the time travel feature. Her the idea that instead of just destroying each robot individually, you actually had to go back to the past, destroy the generator in that timeline, and also two characters have become recurring features in the franchise ever since. Amy Rose, who's his often unweekly lover, and Metal Sonic, like a essentially a mechanized copy that Eggman built to rival him. Especially pretty interesting how now the Origins can suggest that even though this came out in release after the second game, it takes place in between the first and second titles chronologically. And even adding new features like Amy apparently being into tarot cards. Would have guessed. And on a somewhat related note, this builds on the established premise and themes established in the previous installments. Well, both of the main ones I had up to that point. Right? And even finding more unique ways of handling that, because instead of animals, for the most part, whenever you destroy a robot, a flower is planted. And that means anywhere from the lush jungles of the Planetary Panic Zone to even the final stage of Metallic Madness. And the concepts gone over here, and if anything, it builds naturally on the whole, like the mixture speed and platforming, especially. And in spite of what some people who are currently migrating their wikis might have you believe, it's not that tough to gather the gameplay on a basic level. Sure, it may be tough to master all of these, given how many times I played these when I was younger and only started being able to beat the game when it got re-released more and more. But it definitely is worth pointing out, especially my next point is I'm gonna make it across. On the previous points I mentioned, and this is definitely a case where here we have a interesting implementation of the existing concepts, mean where with the Tile Tempest being one, where even though water stages had never been among people's favorites in the series, or in any game for that matter, the design of the temple itself, and how there's more than one way to get to the end, stand out. That also applies to like the quartz quadrants, which appears to be like a quartz mine. You have to make your way through. And this also definitely applies in case of the bosses, like the one I showed you there, where you have to run faster and faster while avoiding like the bombs they might try to drop on you. And it gets so hot that he has to jump out of the machine before you wreck it. And I actually kind of like that. An aspect where the bosses and levels can often be challenging, to be sure, and tricky for many, but by no means impossible. Again, not the toughest Sonic game I've ever played, but I would say it's on the list. Especially given and how, even though I used to have like the Windows version on my computer when I was younger, I only beat it for the first time on the Gems Collection on GameCube when I was a teenager, and I only fairly recently did it with all the time stones owns on Origins within the last 12 months, being factoring in both the classic and anniversary modes. Yeah. As I often tend to do with these kind of videos is to again talk about the impact this game left on the franchise. Is it out of the 3 million that the Sega CD ended up selling worldwide, 1.5 million of the same people bought Sonic CD for it. So, and even factoring in that metric, like half your install base having this game is definitely not a bad number to have on there. And it's also been re-released multiple times, as I pointed out, with the versions I'm familiar with being including on Windows, via Gems Collection on GameCube alongside Sonic the Fighters, which basically like Sonic meets Virtual Fighter, and Sonic R. Not quite as good as Mario Kart 64 even Crash Team Racing, but I got also before it, man. And also now Sonic Origins, and it's main. Further proving that for all the faults, it's still a better Origins explanation than Wolverine, I would say. And with that in mind, all of the ideas, like the use of time travel, oh, the fact that Amy Rose and Metal Sonic became franchise staples for decades to come, um, being reinvented in many ways. Like even her her outfit hits with the green top, the orange blouse, and the pink Converses has now been brought back in recent years, which has become nostalgic. I mean, and and again, Metal Sonic has also been kind of portrayed something like a Terminator in this franchise as well. They even straight up going like a T1000 Sonic Heroes. I mean, it was, but also in much more subtle ways that the many aspects of Hex did make their way into later titles, be it through tangible ways, such as stage design and gameplay, to more subtle ones like music cues and contribution to lore. I think it's all of these factors that had definitely make it my favorite Sega CD game, where even when your innovative new add-on has a bunch of campy F&B titles, sometimes the best way to show off the tech is to take what already works and then do it on a larger scale, in a new format. And with that in mind, what I have in mind for Thursday will also be another game that I love immensely. So I wait and see what it is though. That'll be all for now. I'll see you again soon. Godspeed, kid.